With me now are the Chairman of the Upper House Committee, Robert Brown MLC of the Shooters and Fishers Party, and dissenting committee member Cate Faehrman MLC of the Greens. Welcome. Robert Brown, please explain what's meant by nil tenure and tenure swap.
Okay, nil tenure, very simply, that map you showed in the prelude had the areas of national parks mapped. They're managed by one agency. Right alongside them you have state forests, managed by another agency. Right alongside them you may have Western land leases, managed by yet another agency. Nil tenure means that you simply manage all of that land without those little silos. You take away the tenure and you have it managed as though it's one particular type of land.
Tenure swap.
Tenure swap is where you have, say, 17,000 hectares of state forest in the Pilliga, cypress forest. You've got 50,000 hectares of national park, and you swap some of that for some of the other and just virtually reverse the tenure.
What's wrong with tenure swap?
Well, we've got national parks there for a reason. There's basically a lot of our national parks here in New South Wales, well, some were created decades ago, but in 1992 there was a bipartisan agreement between both the federal and the state government, Liberal parties and Labor governments, who were basically in agreement that we needed to put aside land for reservation and conservation.
Key to this, though, is the undersupply, the alleged undersupply, the claimed undersupply of wood to the forest products industry in New South Wales. You obviously, Mr Brown, accept there is a crisis in supply.
Both my side of politics, if you want to call it that, and I think the Greens agree, that the current arrangement is unsustainable. We cannot continue to log using the current models and the current supply agreements and keep the industry viable. We either get out or we give them some more product.
Well, what about what Dr Ajani said, that the success story of Australia is the plantation timbers that we've been growing for the last 20 years. We've got China coming on, the Greens, the industry, all would agree that that is the future for timber without putting pressure on national parks.
Only if they're native plantations. You can't solve the world's timber needs with softwoods, Gwen, as simple as that.
And we shouldn't have to solve the world's timber needs by opening up our national parks for logging. I mean, this is an agenda that we know that some members of the National Party and the Shooters Party have had for a number of years now. We're seeing logging taking place in Queensland. We're seeing logging in national parks. We're seeing logging taking place in some Victorian national parks. This is going against the grain of everything that previous coalition governments as well as Labor governments have agreed to, and that is that we have to conserve parts of our wonderful natural environment. We're an incredible megadiverse continent. We have hundreds of threatened species. You saw the map there yourself. We need to be protecting these areas. I don't think anybody in New South Wales would disagree with that. Once we open them up for logging, a lot of those threatened species are really at risk.
Logging and conservation are not mutually exclusive, as Kate would like to have your listeners think. Logging, it can be done sustainably. Both.
You need big roads to get into the national parks to thin it, which is what you're proposing.
And to fight fires.
And to fight fires, but there's this disruption. What happens to the threatened species and the biodiversity where the national parks are meant to be protecting?
Our forestry industries are that tightly controlled, Quentin. That's part of the problem too, but we'll leave that for another day. That the threatened species angle really doesn't come into play with their current forestry practices.
Quentin, I was in a forest yesterday near Port Macquarie, about half an hour's drive from Port Macquarie, State Forest managed forest. They had essentially clear-felled this, and it was a native forest, not a plantation. This entire area, a couple of hectares worth, there was a couple of black butt trees remaining. The rest had been completely removed. And what I was hearing from people in that area today and yesterday was that state forests are deliberately removing koala feed trees, right? So Port Macquarie is an area that has a lot of koalas, removing those feed trees, and they want blackbutt because they want to create monocultures. The problem with national parks and logging in national parks is industry will need to make a profit out of it. They're not talking about thinning national parks for conservation values. They're talking about getting into national parks and logging them to the extent that they are no longer a refuge for biodiversity.
You're talking about more than that. You want multiple use. In nil tenure, you want multiple use.
And koalas don't live in old growth forests, mate. They like a particular size and age of tree with nice sweet leaves on it. So this garbage
this is Port Macquarie,
and
key koala habitat.
The committee went to those same logging coops. There's nothing wrong with the way they're logging them.
Where's your guarantee about if you want to get an argument or a debate about the sustainability of the industry? Where's your upfront guarantee about threatened species?
The EPA provides that because the EPA rides them.
But that's another authority. You're talking about silos, but that's another authority.
No, I'm talking about silos, but I'm not necessarily talking about the EPA being taken out of the equation, Quentin.
We have got an incredible proportion of the species on this planet in this country. The north coast of New South Wales is an incredible biodiversity hotspot. And I'll tell you what, back to Port Macquarie, because I've just been there for the last 2 days, and there was a national koala conference I was at today. Research was presented that showed the koala population in Port Macquarie is all on the east coast now, all on the east side of the Pacific Highway, along the coastal areas. They're doing better in suburbs than they are in state forests, because state forests are not logging them sustainably.
It's working to a business plan.
Koalas used to be in those forests. They're no longer in those forests, despite what I heard on this committee time and time again from witnesses and from the committee members actually, that logging is good for biodiversity. That was what the timber industry was telling me and loggers were telling me. I'm sorry, but it is not happening because the research is showing that animals that need forests to survive are leaving them, or they're being killed during the logging process.
Hundreds of people came to these inquiries. What Kate's saying is that their opinion doesn't matter. It's her opinion that counts. Wrong.
No.
What about the jobs? There was a lot of submissions about jobs, and the timber towns in particular, even with their compensation, they were saying, well, look, tourism doesn't replace what we've lost.
Yeah, that is true. That we did hear a lot from some of the smaller timber communities in certain parts of regional New South Wales. What we also heard, though, when pressed and asked questions about this, was that some of those timber communities were already in decline. Whether that was from the drought, whether that was from the fact that the forests weren't being managed sustainably to begin with. So this is what the Natural Resources Commission came in to look at with the river red gums and the pilliga. How can we actually get them to be managed sustainably? And I have to say, in terms of the recommendations of this inquiry, in terms of the moratorium of the national parks, the tenure swap, that didn't come from anyone within government, that didn't come from any of the experts in conservation or the scientists, it all came from industry.
It all came from community. Let's be frank.
Links to the timber industry.
Well, Quentin, if you've got the whole of this table as New South Wales and we lose 10 jobs here, it doesn't matter. If you've got a little town here and you lose 10 jobs, end of town.
In relation to jobs, though, I mean, we know that the tourism sector for New South Wales is enormous. We know that a lot of people are coming into New South Wales because of our natural assets. A lot of people are coming into Australia to enjoy national parks. Visitation numbers are huge.
We'll have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks Quentin.
Do you have something to say about tonight's items? Why not tell us on Twitter, #730NSW, or send us a story tip by email. You can visit our blog for extended interviews and extra material, or find old stories on our ABC archive page. We'd love for you to keep in touch.